Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to get your Discord bot up and running in under 5 minutes. I know most tutorials, they start off, they make you install a text editor, Node.js, a bunch of other stuff that's confusing and is a pain in the ass. So my goal here is I'm going to use some free online tools like an online text editor. You don't have to install anything, and we can move on with that to getting started and writing a cool bot as soon as possible. Some examples of what we'll be making are a basic response bot to react and reply to messages, a deletion bot so that you can delete old messages. We'll show you how to make API calls, in this case for a joke bot, but you could also make a weather bot and all sorts of stuff like that. We'll then go into moderation, how to kick and ban users automatically, how to create roles and stuff like that. And we'll cover the newest version of Discord.js, which is version 12, and some important stuff so that long term your bot will continue working and won't have any errors. And finally, we'll make a word filter bot for automatic moderation of your server. In future videos, I'll be making stuff covering making command handlers, how to make a currency system and a ranking system using a database, and how to embed stuff and make interactive bots that can reply depending on how users interact with it. So with all that said, let's get started. Alright, so first thing we want to do so we can avoid downloading Node.js and a text editor and dealing with all that hassle is you're going to want to go to Google and type in Replit Node.js. What this is a free tool that gives us a Node.js development environment right in our browser. So from here we'll be able to run our code, and that avoids a ton of wasting time downloading stuff. Then what we're going to do is type in Discord developer, and if you're not already logged in, it'll give you a sign up form, and then it'll bring you to your developer dashboard where you can see all your applications and bots. What we're going to want to do is go to new application, and here you can just type in whatever you want the bot to be. So let's do tutorial bot 2, and you can call it the name, doesn't matter here, but you just need to give it something. So we'll create, and now we're inside our application. What we need to do now is create the bot. Just click add bot, yes, and now we need to add it to our server with OAuth 2. So we want to add redirect. What we're going to do is http:// I'm going to do localhost 5000. So now we can go down here and use that. And what we want to do is now give basically permissions to our bot. So we're going to click bot. And down here we want to give it administrator permissions so that it can ban members, basically do all those different tasks that we want it to have the right to do. So we're going to click save changes, and then we're going to grab this URL. If we just copy and paste, you can see here, so this is our bot, we're signed in, and depending on what servers you have the rights to manage, it'll give you a drop down of all those. So we're going to click continue, and then authorize it as administrator, and then just verify. So if we close out of this, we can now see that inside our server we can see this bot is added. So now what we want to do is go into our text editor, and we'll get signed up and logged into our server. First thing we need to do is go over to packages, and we're going to import the Discord.js library. So we can just type that in, and we want to make sure we're getting version 12. That's the newest updated version. And we're just going to click add package. And we can see it's automatically doing that for us. What we also want to add is node fetch. This is what we're going to use for doing API requests later in the tutorial. So we're going to add both of those. If we look, we can see in our package.json, both of those will show up, and that means we can use them in our code up here in our index. So let's just do the simple thing, and we'll make sure our bot can actually connect. So we're going to do const discord equals require, and we're going to pull in that Discord.js library. We're going to do const bot equals discord.client. And then below that, what we want to do is bot.login. And what we need to provide here is our token. So we go back into our developer portal, and we're going to go into our bot. We scroll up. We're going to want to reveal this token, and then just copy it. We go back in here, we're going to create a token variable, so just const token, and inside a string, we're going to create that little thing, and we're going to pass this here. And what this, this token is essentially like a password for our bot, so that should log us in. And then what we want to do to verify that is we're going to do bot.on ready, and then we're going to create a function. We're just going to console.log bot logged in. So what's going on here basically is we're creating a client, we're using our token to log in here, and then once this is verified it's logged in, it will send off a ready event, and we'll talk more about different types of events and what that all means later. But for now, we just want to verify that everything's working. And that's, forgot to do new to actually run that properly. And then we can see that we are logged in, and our bot, if we go over here, we can see it's actually logged in over here as well. Alright, so now we got all that annoying stuff taken care of, and we're connected to our server, so now we can move on to the fun stuff, which is actually writing some commands and letting our bot actually automate some stuff and whatever we want it to do. So the first thing we should look at is, what does this bot.on even mean? What this is it's an event listener is what it's called, and anytime, so in this case ready, whatever event is passed here, it'll listen for that. So ready only fires on the first time our bot logs in to our server, and that's why we got this message here. When you can see, it's actually, our program is still running, our bot is listening for any event, but because we don't have any other listeners, it won't do anything. So let's take a look at the documentation, and if we look here, we can see all the different event types. So this is WS's WebSocket, and that's how our bot listens to the events coming from the server. So we can see ready, guild create. What this means is if your bot is added to a server, this event gets fired off. Most of these you won't mess with a lot, but something like guild member add, if you want to create a channel for welcoming people to your server, you could listen for this event, and then every time somebody's added, you could send a message welcoming them to the server. You can also do stuff, obviously bans, roles creation, stuff like that. The ones you'll be using a lot is message. You can specifically listen for message created, deleted, updated, but for us, what we'll do is just listen for a generic message. So bot.on, we'll do message, and then we pass in, unlike ready, which doesn't pass in anything, with the message event, we get access to that object. So we pass in that as a parameter, and then inside this we can access whatever content. So we can get access to the text inside of the message itself. We can see who wrote the message, all kinds of stuff. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna start off simple, is, before we even get into that, is create a prefix for our commands. So we're gonna do const prefix equals, and we're gonna use an exclamation mark. And why we want to do this is because for certain commands, we don't want to process every single message going into our server. We want to be able to filter irrelevant messages out. So our first code inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to do if message.content 0. So what this does is every time somebody types something inside the server, it's going to look for, so if we want to do kick, it's going to make sure that this first letter here is a prefix, and that means it's a command. If it's not, what will happen is, if it doesn't equal prefix, we're just going to hit console.log no prefix, and then we're going to return. So instead of running through all of our commands, we can just immediately, right away, we know this message isn't a command, and we can just get rid of it. So now let's go test that out. If we just put in a random message here, click enter, we can go and see that it logged no prefix. That's because we didn't have our exclamation point for a command, so it automatically hits here and it just returns. So now we can move on to creating a command. So if we go under here, let's first help ourselves out for the future, where we're going to split off our arguments. Because in theory, if we want to, like for our kick bot, we'll have to pass in here we'll want to do kick, and then we'll want to pass our reference to our user. So we can do like at, where is somebody? Here we go. So we're going to pass in this test account and we'll kick that. So we need an argument. So inside here, we're going to split that off by doing const args. We're going to set that equal to message.content.slice. We're going to slice it by prefix.length. The reason we do this is because you could technically make our command, we could do 3 exclamation points. You could set this to whatever you want. So this will dynamically, no matter how long this is, it'll slice that off. And then after that, we want to trim any extra spaces or anything, and then we want to split it into individual arguments by spacing. So you could pass in multiple commands. So kick, you could do, or whatever command, you could type in whatever you want, and then it'll split these off where the spaces are. So delete that. Underneath here, we're going to also set this to args.shift, and then we're going to set it to lowercase. So what's going on here is this will slice off our prefix, like I said. It'll break it out into words. So let's just actually console.log so you can see what's going on here. So we'll print our args first, and then we'll print our command below this. So console.log, and we'll do command. So what you'll see is that first this will give us our entire message, and what this does, this shift, is it splits off the first letter, the first word inside our message, which will be our command. So we'll just do a test run here. We'll rerun that. So we'll do .kick, and then some random words as our arguments. It could be a user, it could be whatever. And if we put that in and go back here, we can see first we get an array, and the first one is our kick, and then we have our arguments here, and then here we can see our second print is just the command itself. So that'll allow us now, underneath this, we can then check for what the actual command is, and depending on that, we can change what our bot does. And also, like you can see, this is what this slice does, is it removes the exclamation point so we can directly access what the command is. So now let's make our first actual command. We got all this set up. Might seem at first a little bit of a waste of time, but what this will allow us to do is long term, it makes our bot much more versatile, and it'll save us a lot of extra code in the long run. So our first bot, let's just make it so it replies. We'll call it our ego bot. If you need an ego boost, we can have it reply and tell you what a great post you made, and also we can show how you can react to posts through your bot as well. So if message, actually if command equals ego, what we want to do is take that message, we're going to do .react, and for reaction images you can just type in whatever emoji you want to use, or if you have a custom emoji, you can do that. So we just type it like that. Then we can also do message.reply, and whatever text will say, wow, what a great post. So now what we want to do, we're going to restart our bot. Now if we go in here, we type ego, we can see that we get, wow, what a great post. And for some reason, our reaction didn't work properly. And I think that's because, yeah, it says unknown emoji. I got confused. You can do this, you can use the shortcode if you do like a reply or a message, but for React, you actually need to get the Unicode for the emoji. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Whoops. And what you need to get is like the actual emoji you want to use. So you can just Google for that. So if we do this now, it should work. So we're going to restart. Everything works. Let's try it again. And now we can see we actually got our smiley. So if you're just sending a message, like we could just do smiley like that in here and it would work. But for the actual reaction, for whatever reason, the library requires that you copy and paste the actual emoji in there. For our next command, let's make a like a delete bot so we can clear out old messages. So you don't have to watch me type. I'm just going to copy and paste this command in here and we'll walk through it. So we can see similar deal here. We just have our command. In this case, we're looking for clear. So we set a default of 2, and the reason we do that is your message itself will be up for deletion, so you want to clear out the command and then also maybe the message behind it. It's also going to check for an argument, so this is going to be a number, so you can pass in however many you want. So if you want to delete 10 messages, it'll be like going in here, you'll do clear, you can pass in 10. So this number behind here is however many messages you want to clear out. We then have to, because it gets passed in as a string, we have to do this parse int, which converts it from a string into a number. And then this is another example. We'll go over the message object itself that we receive. So up here, whenever this event is fired, we get this message. So in addition to the content of the message like we get here, we also get what channel it was used in. So we access the channel, and then we have an option of bulk delete, and we pass in that number. And whatever numbers passed in there, that's how many messages will be deleted, and it's in most recent order. So the most recent messages will be deleted. And then finally, we add in this little this message to the channel saying we deleted that many posts for you. So if we restart this again, and we go in here and we say clear, let's just say 10. And you can see everything except for this, since there was less than 10, it just all got deleted out of there. You could also extend this, and let's say instead of just deleting by number, let's say you have somebody in your server trolling and you just want to delete their most recent messages, you could do something like this where you identify the user. So that looks like const user equals message.mentions.users.first. So what this would do is you could do a clear command, you could specify the number, and then you could also do a user. And what this command does, that'll pull out that user mention, and then you could do something like you do message.channel.messages, and then you'd fetch, and you can pass in an object like this, and you could say, so fetch the last 100 messages from the channel, and then inside that, this returns a message list, which is something we'll go over early or a little bit later, which is a collection object, which is built into Discord.js and gives us a bunch of ways to sort through and look at the information in that list. And you could then filter it. I'm not going to write out the code, but you could filter for this specific user's ID. So you could access their name, their username, or their ID. And you could go through this list, and any message that matches their user ID, you just clear those out. So that's like a more fine-tuned way of getting rid of messages rather than just doing a bulk delete. You can also we'll go into moderation and roles and permissions in a little bit, and that's another way. So you don't want anybody to be able to delete messages. We'll go over how you could set a role so that maybe only a moderator or somebody can use some of these commands. So before we jump into making those more complicated bots, I think it's a good idea that we take a look at the documentation, because I know for me at least, and a lot of you people, if you're new, you're probably confused, like what exactly is a message object, what can we do with it, what is a channel, what's a user, all that sort of thing. So let's look at the documentation and get a big picture view. So the main thing our bot is it's a client object, and what that gives us access to is the channels that our bot is monitoring. So if you're hooked up to multiple servers or channels, you can basically get a list of all of those and you can go through them. You can also look at the guilds. So this is if you have a popular bot and it's on multiple servers, you can take a look at all those, and also all the users that are part of those channels and servers. That is how we create. If we go back, we can see, so this is our client, and this is how you create your event listeners for each of those. Moving on, let's look at our guilds. So the guild is each individual server. Some of the information on that, you can see pretty much anything you can customize through the actual Discord app, you can do with your bot. So you can see there's dozens of these different properties and also regions or methods that you can work with. So you can go through this and kind of look at all the available options and get some ideas for your own bots. A big thing to understand is the difference between a user and a guild member. So user is like the actual major global object. So a user can be a member of multiple guilds. Obviously they can join multiple servers. So in this case, if we go back, you can see what we use this user for is just to see if they even exist. So with our moderation bot, the first thing we'll do is we'll grab and look for the user and see if they're even mentioned. So we want to make sure there's an actual user, and then once we do that, we can access some other properties. You can get like username, stuff like that, but for the most part, you don't actually use the user for your bot. You won't be using this a ton. The thing you will be using is the guild member, because if we look at this, we can see we get a lot of stuff, mainly roles. So if you assign somebody a role of moderator, you're going to make sure before you place a command that they have that role. And you can also, it's kind of circular in that if you have the guild member, you can also look up the user, and if you have the user, you can look up their member status as well. This guild member property is what you're going to be using. You can see you have ban option, kick option, and check their permissions as well. So this is something in our later bots we'll be using quite a bit. So let's look at next. We've worked with messages quite a bit. That's mainly what we've worked with so far, and we can see some of the stuffs like content. We used that earlier. That gave us access to that string. You can fetch messages, which is what we did back here. You can see with our message list, we went to the channel, the message, and then we fetched those messages. So there's a lot of stuff here. You have options like if it's editable, you can't edit somebody else's messages. Obviously, that'd be pretty bad if you could just change what they said and then make them look bad. You can look for the mentions. We've used that as well. Something key to remember or to keep in mind about mentions when you're making a moderation bot is that these aren't in order. So if there's multiple people mentioned inside of a message, it's sorted by who was a member first or who joined the server first. So you could make a pretty bad mistake if you made a bot where you said ban and you put in multiple people. You could accidentally ban like the wrong person, or if you're saying we're banning this person because they said something to another user, you could actually ban the person who was on the receiving end. So you want to be careful when you're dealing with mentions. Moving on, we talked about our events. I showed you a list earlier. I'm going to post this little cheat sheet in the description below, because this gives you actual examples. Instead of just the name, it gives you also what parameter you get. So you can go through this and look for every single event type that your bot can use. It tells you what type of object it passes to the function and what you can kind of do with that object. So this is a really useful resource that I'll be posting a link to. Last couple things I want to cover are our role object, which again you can see this will be when we're creating like a moderator, an administrator, or all the various roles with different permissions. This is going to be another important thing. You can search by ID or name. This is kind of an important thing because the name can always be changed. If you want to change it from mod to moderator, that can break your bot code. So it's always better generally to go by ID, because that'll stay the same. So you don't want to have to, if somebody decides to change the name of the role, you don't want to have to go into your code and edit all that. The final thing, which is one of the most important things we'll be dealing with in Discord, is the collection object. So this is what, like when we return a list of messages here, this is a collection. And it's also, if we have multiple users, so if we talked about earlier how you can use the client to access all the users on a guild or on a channel, this is the generic object for all those different types of lists. No matter what you're dealing with, this is the object that'll be returned. And you can see there's a bunch of different methods we can use. So you can filter out. So if you want to filter out based on some kind of condition, you could filter. So based on the date a user joined the server, you can filter out the newer members so that you're only messaging or doing something for the older members. You can do stuff like each or map that just goes over every single object, and you can, depending on some factor, you can take an action. You can look for first. This is what we used with the user mentions, where we just grab the first mentioned user. So this is something you'll want to go through. Some of them you'll use a lot, some of them you'll rarely use, but this is one of the most important things you'll be dealing with when you're working with Discord.js. So let's clear out this old code here, and also check out one last thing before we get back to writing some code for our bots, and that is something new to the Discord API, which is called gateway intents. What these are, they become mandatory on October 7th, 2020, and if you don't have this taken care of, your bot will stop working. In a nutshell, it comes down to making your bot more efficient. If we go in here now, our bot receives every event that happens on our server, our bot receives that. So even though we're only listening to our messages, we're getting notifications from the server every time somebody types, every time somebody joins the server, all these events that we're not necessarily using at the moment, and that takes processing power for our bot, which can slow it down. So what gateway intents are about is you can go down here, and instead of just listening to everything, you can specify what exactly, what events you want your bot to be able to handle. So you have messages, reactions, typing, all this sort of stuff, and you can very specifically select what exactly you want your bot to listen to. So what that looks like is right here, we just have Discord client and we're not passing anything to it. With the new version, what it would look like is something like this, where you specify an object, which is WS, which if you look at the documentation, that's the WebSocket. And then inside that, you pass an object of your intents. So these are your gateway intents, and you can pass an array. So guilds, guild messages. And if you go to this documentation, you can see all your different options here. Another option is if you just want to listen to all your events like you normally would, you can pass in an object that looks like this, which is you just import. So the same way we created our client Discord, this Discord.js library, you can just grab the intents object and then all. So you're just passing, instead of putting in an array, you can just do this and that'll let you listen to any event. So let's delete this. We don't really need to worry about that for now. And let's move on to making our API bot. So what we're going to do here is go to Google. We're just going to put in joke API. And this first link is what we're going to use. You can do any API. This is just an example. So you could do something like make a weather bot, pull in all sorts of different stuff. And I'll put a link. There's like a collection of public APIs, so it'll give you a lot of ideas, but what we're going to use is this random joke. And you can see this is what it returns. It gives us an ID, which we won't worry about, and then the setup and the punchline. And every time we call that, it'll give us just a different joke. If we refresh, we can see it changes. So what we're going to want to do is use that URL and create another command. So we're going to do if command equals joke, and inside this we are going to use a async await. So if we have that, we're going to want to add this up here, and we're also going to come down here, and inside we're going to do let get joke equal async. We're going to return what's called a promise in JavaScript. We're going to do let result equal await fetch. And this is where we need our node fetch library up here. This is why we imported this over here earlier. So we're going to do const fetch equals require node dash fetch. And we can see that pop that pulls up. So this will allow us to make these API requests, and we're just going to copy and paste that URL. Whoops. Go back and get this. And then underneath that, what we gotta do is convert. So this will give us a response. And then we want to, underneath that, we're gonna say let JSON equal await result dot JSON. So that converts it to something we can work with in JavaScript. And then we want to return that. Return JSON. So then underneath, what we're going to do is let joke equal await get joke. So here we're creating this function, and then we're calling it here, and what that'll do is the end result, it will return what we see here, and then we can use that by sending a message. So we go here, and now we can do message.reply. So whoever calls this joke command, we're going to reply. We're going to do these backticks. We're going to say, here's your joke. And then inside this, we're going to do our punchlines. We're going to do joke.setup. And then joke.punchline. Now let's run our code and test it out over in our server. Give that a second to reboot. Let's go over here. Call our joke command, and we can see here's your joke, and it gives us our setup punchline. Next thing we're going to work on is probably the most complicated bot we're going to make, or command we're going to make, which is our moderation bot. So we're going to do if command equals kick. Inside this, the first thing you want to do is we need to kind of set up, we need to create our roles. So we need to go to user settings, and you're going to want to go to appearance, and you want to enable developer mode. This will allow us to, if we right click, like over here, the account we're going to kick, we can copy the ID, and that's going to be how we grab that. It'll also allow us to get our role. So you want to enable developer mode, then go into server settings and roles. And I've already created this moderator role. What you want to do, you can name it whatever you want, but you want to go in here, make sure you have the right to kick, ban, and create, and then assign this role to whatever. This would be something you'd hand out to users so that they could obviously moderate. So once you've created that, you're going to right click and click copy ID. So first thing we're going to do inside is we want to make sure whoever uses this command is actually allowed to kick people. We don't want people who just joined the server to be able to kick out whoever they want. We're going to do if exclamation point message dot member dot roles, and then dot cache. So this is new. This cache is new for version 12. This in the past you wouldn't have to specify this, but now we do. And then you do dot has, and this is where we paste in that ID we grabbed from our UI. Whoops, gotta go back and grab it again. So copy ID and paste. So this is basically going to verify. So the reason we have this exclamation point is we want to see if it does not have it. So if it doesn't have this moderation role, what we want to do is do message dot reply. We're going to say you don't have permission to kick users. So this, before we even do anything else, we want to verify whether the person making this command even has the ability or the rights to kick somebody from the server. Once we go underneath that, what we want to do is then check and make sure they even mentioned a user. So we're going to do const user equals message.mentions .users.first, and then we're going to do similar where if user, so if the user, if there's nobody mentioned in this message, do the same thing, message dot reply. We're going to say no user mentioned. We also want to make sure we return here. We don't want to continue. We have to return because we don't want to continue, otherwise we'd go down here again even if they don't have the role. So we have to make sure we return there. And then we also want to do return here if there's no user. And finally below here we also have to verify, so we're going to do const member. This is where we grab, we talked about earlier when we went over the documentation. This is just the global user. Now we have to verify that they're a member of the server so that we can kick them from this server. So we're going to do const member equals message.guild.member, and we're going to use user. So we're going to pass in the mentioned user and get their data on their member object. So now we're going to say if they are a member of the server, we're going to go down here, we're going to do member.kick, and this, what this message here does is this gets logged in the server, so you could customize this so you can say who called this. So if somebody gets improperly kicked, it would log this. But we're just going to say this is a message for the server logs. Then after that, we're going to do dot then. So that's a promise, a JavaScript promise. And what we're going to do is after they've been kicked, we're going to pass a function. And we're just going to say message.reply. We're going to specify user.tag, so that user was kicked from the server. So So let's restart this and make sure our bot works properly. Go over here, make sure this is on, give it a second. We're just gonna do .kick, and we're gonna use this test account here as our thing. Let's click enter, and we can see our bot responds with test account was kicked, and we can see it disappeared over here. So our moderation bot is working. And if you didn't want to do a kick, the command, once again, if you go to the documentation, all you have to do is change this to ban, and your moderation bot will work the same way. You could also just create separate commands. So if we go kick, you could just basically copy and paste this for the most part and change the command to ban. And there's a lot of other ways you can customize. You can check, instead of looking at a role, you can look for a specific permission and do all sorts of stuff. But this is just a basic moderation bot for you to base whatever you want to do. You can use this as kind of a template. So next on our list is another type of moderation, which is we're going to make a word filter bot. To do that, we're actually going to create a second message event listener. The reason we want to do that is this. We automatically, if it's not a command, we just break out and don't do anything with it. So we're going to want to create a second event listener that will look at every message no matter what. So we're going to do message again. Same deal, we're just going to pass our message, and inside this function what we're going to do is create a word array. So word array equals message.content.split. We're going to do space, so this will just break up every message into individual words, and above this we're going to create what's called a set. So we're going to do let set equal new set, and then we're just going to do bad word. So this is an example, and this is basically a list, so you can put as many words in here as you wanted. We're just going to use this as an example, and the reason we're creating this set is it's gone a little bit into more technical stuff, but this is much more efficient than using like a normal list. This allows us to instantly look up whether this word is inside this instead of having to sort through an entire list, which would be exponentially slower. So if you have a lot of messages going through your server, you want to make sure you use this type of data structure, but that's kind of goes into computer science stuff, so that's way beyond the scope of this tutorial. So once we have our list of bad words defined and we've broken our message into individual words, we want to loop over it. So we're going to do for var I equals 0. We're going to do word array dot length as long as I is less than word array dot length I plus plus. So we're going to loop through every word in this array, and then inside of that we're going to do if our set dot has word array I. So if, when we're looping over our message, our words in our message, if any of those words are inside our defined filter words, we're going to delete the message. So we're going to do message.delete, and then we're going to apply message.channel.send, and we're just going to say sorry to the user who wrote that. Sorry, message.author.username. This is a Christian server. No bad words allowed. So we got this defined. Or also we can console.log that our message has been filtered. And we also want to put a break here, because if we don't add this break, even if we see that this word has been, or this message is bad, it'll continue looping through every word. So once we found at least one word that is inside of this array, we can break out of it. So now let's go test that out. So if we just go put in some random stuff and then put in bad word, we can see we get the message automatically gets deleted, and for some reason we're getting a bunch of prints. Let's see. what the issue is here. That might be because we need to put the break. Actually, we put it in the wrong spot, so we have to put it in here. So the reason we got all these different messages is because it printed that for every single word inside that array. So now if it should work properly, we should just get the one. So let's do bad word. And again, it did it. Let's see. Alright, so this is actually a good learning experience. You can see it. We basically created, or I created on accident, an infinite loop. So this is good for what you should not do. So the problem earlier was that I had our second event listener pasted inside of our first. I didn't notice this last set of brackets. So you want to make sure that you copy and paste that code so it's not nested inside this other event listener. That's what was going wrong earlier, and that's why you see all these printed out things. So now if we try it out, we should see everything work without all this mess. So let's print bad word, and we see it just deletes. We get the one right here, and it deletes our message, and our word filter works properly. One other thing you might want to consider when you're working with bots so you don't create an infinite loop is you can see that every time our bot responds, this message channel send, it actually filters itself. So there's a way you can check to make sure that doesn't happen, because for example, let's say whatever word we're filtering, our bot actually says it. That would result in an infinite loop because it would send a reply banning itself or removing the word, but then it would kick off another message event when it sends that. So the way you can make sure your bot doesn't respond to itself is you can just do if message.author.bot. This is a true or false value. So if the author of whatever message sent is a bot, you could just automatically return, and that would make sure your bots don't create loops where they're responding to each other and just cause a bunch of chaos. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So I think that's going to be it for this video. We covered quite a bit of stuff. The plan right now is in future videos I'm going to cover stuff like handling user input so that you can make interactive bots. Also, I'm going to show how you can better organize your code with command handlers, which would help you avoid like what we just saw, because we had so much stuff going on. I missed those brackets. So like lack of organization, if you have a bot with a lot of commands, can lead to problems. So I'm going to cover that as well. Also how to store data, so use a database so that you can make like a currency system or some kind of ranking system for your users. You need a database to store that long term. How to make embeds with your bot and just stuff like that. Any ideas for bots that you want to see, feel free to comment below, and subscribe if you're interested in any of those videos I mentioned.